Hello everyone, my name is Zarbon. Welcome back to another SH Figuarts review. In today's video, we're going to be taking a look at Zarbon in his true power form, or what a lot of people like to refer to him as, Monster Zarbon. And honestly, I'm very excited about this figure because realistically, or honestly, I think this figure does not look that bad. Especially with some of the pictures that did surface when this guy was releasing. I got my Zarbon off of Nin Game, mostly because figures like this are often cheaper if you import them directly from Japan, although it might be different starting next month, which I'm not going to get into in this video. Plus, I don't think I'm going to make a video about it because last time I made a video about it, people got annoyed about it. So I'm not going to do any of that here. I'm not going to be talking about the current situation in the world. But without further ado, I'm very excited to get this guy out, so let's take him out and see how he looks. Alright, so here we have the beautiful Monster Zarbon, and I gotta say, this figure is actually pretty decent. It's not perfect, but it's actually really decent, surprisingly. Although, mine already has a couple of defects with the actual paint and everything. Which is something I actually want to talk about first, but before that, let me show you the height for this figure. He can stand actually pretty well, which is surprising to say the least, especially with how like hefty he is, like top heavy. He is around 6.5 inches to the top of his head, which is really nice. And here's how he compares to the 24,000 power level Vegeta, which is arguably one of the best looking Vegetas currently out there. So yeah, God damn it. I had him in the Dirty Fireworks pose, and that's pretty much the only pose I will have him in. But this is how he looked in the actual, or how he looks in the as a figure. And honestly, people will say that this figure is a little bit too stubby. And I actually do agree with it to a certain extent, although it is important to note that heights for characters were never really confirmed, but it is important to also note that different artists and different animators animated characters differently. Sometimes the characters were much taller than they actually seemed, than they were intended to, at least by Toriyama, which, again, something important to note, not saying that it isn't that way or anything like that, but yeah, just something to put out there, because again, I don't think he looks that off as to how he looked in the actual anime. But yeah, like, even I'm looking at some pictures right now, and there's so many different iterations of the character already. Although I do think that his legs should be slightly taller, or longer, sorry, not longer, not taller, but longer. I do think that they should be longer, to say the least. Now, the aesthetic of the figure, it's pretty bland. There's like no paint whatsoever, not even in the skin. No, there's no shading whatsoever. It's literally just pure pieces of plastic. The only things that are painted are the purple parts right here on the sleeves for the actual arms, or the biceps, and of course the face and the brown parts for the armor. That is probably the most unfortunate part about this figure, is that it's very bland when it comes to paint, and I don't like that. I think it definitely lacks depth. So yeah, there's that. So articulation, this figure does have a decent amount of articulation. When it comes to the cape, you can go all the way back out like that, and it is on a hinge. Unfortunately, no cloth cape. This little piece right here does pop off if you would like to have it do so, and you actually do need to do it to actually put on the cape. It is easier to do it that way. You don't necessarily have to, but you will have a little bit of issue because it does go underneath this section, which is why it gets pushed up a little bit when you use the full range of the cape. So just something to note there. We do have the swivels on the arms right here. sorry, not the arms, the shoulders. And then for the neck, you can kind of see it already. He can look down about that far, and he does have the same hinge mechanism as the full power, or not the full power, the Super Saiyan Broly that they've released in the past, which is something to actually note, because he actually allows him to look up pretty decent, actually. Not too bad. He does have a ball peg for the ponytail, which is good to say the least. He can look side to side pretty well, and then he can also pivot, surprisingly. So he can use the neck to pivot it, so something to note. For the arms, you can get them above a T-pose if you actually technically pop out the shoulders, but you will pop them out if you try to move them, but you can get above a T-pose with this range. You can rotate, you can also rotate them. Let me actually get this off of him. You can actually rotate his arms 360 degrees without the shoulder pads, bicep swivel, double jointed elbow that actually works pretty well, and a wrist hinge that goes back and forth. At least I think it's a wrist hinge. No, it's just a ball peg. It's just a regular old ball peg. Look at that. Nice. Actually, not a bad idea, especially for a big figure like this. I don't think he needs wrist hinges, because otherwise it'd actually be a little bit difficult to actually move him. For the torso, actually really good torso articulation. It allows him to look down pretty far. It actually does go down a fair bit. And going backwards, also not too much, but it still allows him to go a little bit far out. Pivoting, not so much, but it can be done just a tiny bit. Swivel, and then we of course have the joint for the bottom, which allows him to also go even further with the ab crunch, which is really nice. And then going backwards, not so much, but you do have that swivel as well, just a little bit, not too much, because he does have a little piece sticking right here. Don't understand why they added this. You could actually just get rid of this, and it will look ugly. Don't worry, it would look ugly, but it would actually allow him to swivel a little bit better, because it is sort of restricting. For the legs, the stubby little legs, about 90 degrees for the split, kicking forward. Not so much, but you can probably get him to kick a little bit further out if you move the leg just a tiny bit, but that's about as far as it goes. Going backwards, not so much either, because he does have sculpted butt cheeks for a reason, but he does have the sleeves too. Don't understand why, but he can kick backwards at an angle. Thigh swivel, double jointed knee, that looks okay, not too bad. And a foot hinge peg that goes forward this far, backwards that far, with a hinge that looks ugly. So yeah, articulation-wise, this guy actually surprised me a bit more than I initially thought he was going to do. He does a lot more than I expected him to, and that is something to be happy about, because that is a good sign that Bandai can sometimes amaze you when it comes to their decisions. Again, he does like paint, but I think the articulation somewhat makes up for it, but not really. Now, let's look at his accessories, because he does come with a standard mount. Alright, so when it comes to the accessories, he does come with the standard amount of what you'd encounter for pretty much any figure out there. Now, we do have a grinning faceplate, which, to be fair, these are sculpted fairly beautifully, although there is like some residue and just leftover plastic in my actual faces, which is unfortunate, because that should not be a thing. I would probably have to clean this up just a tiny bit with like maybe soap and water. Yeah, because there's like actual residue. I know some of these are the actual skin textures, which is something that I will not go against or try to fix. We have the funny looking expression when Vegeta is fisting him in his insides, so there is that. And then we have the angry, maniacal expression, which looks really nice with the mouth open. We do have 2 Ki Blast shooting hands, 2 fighting stance hands. We do have 2 Karate Chop hands, but also Ki Blast shooting hands. And also the wind swept ponytail, which, again, looks okay, to say the least. So, yeah. Going into my final thoughts, I do think that this figure is actually fairly decent because it's an okay figure. It's not gonna be perfect. It's not perfect. I don't know what I'm doing at this point. Overall, as a score, I'm gonna give it a 7 out of 10 because it is the most okay figure to actually get right now. But I would probably hold off on this figure if you're wanting to get it at a cheaper price, because it does seem that right now in Japanese retail sites like Nin Game and even Hobby Genki, a lot of the premium Bandai figures are going for less than retail. And that's not just me saying that because of the Japanese conversion rates or the yen conversion rates. And it's mostly because of me saying that they just are not selling the greatest. So I would hold off on it for now. It's not a must-have unless you are a big fan of Monster Zarbon. Just wait. But that's pretty much all the time I have for you guys today. Let me know what you guys think about this figure. Do you like it? Do you not like it? I would love to know down in the comments below, because I actually do think it's a pretty decent figure. But besides that, like and subscribe and all that sort of jazz, and I'll see you all in the next one. Bye-bye.